As a seasoned ranger of Yosemite's vast wilderness for over a decade, I've come across many oddities whispered among the trees, spotted owls perched defiant against reality, invisible animal tracks tracing life cycle, and maybe even an unexplained phenomenon or two. But nothing could prepare me for that haunting August night, etched in my memory, woven into the DNA of those impenetrable woods. Late into the afternoon on that fateful day, I was called in by headquarters, their voices a frantic haze over the radio. Ranger Stevens. Cole, a 7-year-old boy, has gone missing near Mirror Lake. His mom Sarah last saw him by the trailhead. Racing against the original golden dusk, I led a search party of seasoned hikers and keen-eyed volunteers through the dense growth on a rescue mission. The soft murmurs of the approaching nightfall hung heavily against the daunting task ahead. We harnessed the powerful beams of our flashing lights, probing at the monstrous shadows curved beneath the towering pines. As the hours wore on, the cold gnawed at our skin, while despair clawed at our hope. Suddenly, our search dogs froze, their pointed gaze directed towards something in a thicket. A sigh of relief choked in my throat as I spotted a small camouflaged canvas shoe. "It's the boys," cried Sarah, a mother's instincts overriding her teary terror. The dogs led us deeper, away from the marked trails into the untouched woods. An eerie sensation began to creep upon us, a feeling of eyes within the forest watching our every move. Words exchanged in whispers ricocheted off the gnarled trunk of ancient sequoias. The silence was thick, eating up our voices. We came to a clearing where the anemic moonlight fought its way. The ring formation of bizarrely twisted trees interrupted our path. The air here felt different, heavy. The dogs whimpered uneasily, their tails tucked in fear. Their refusal to continue registered in my gut, a foreboding sense of dread. From the twisted woods, a chilling melody weaved its way to us, a juvenile rhyme, but devoid of childlike warmth. It sounded like a child's voice, echoing callously, "Here I reckon, here I stay. In these woods, I'll forever play." Our flashlights flickered uncontrollably, their usual steady beams dancing with fear. The temperature, already chilling to the bone, dropped further until we could see our own breath fogging up in frantic pants. Paralyzed by an all-consuming invisible force, we all turned towards the source of the uncanny voice. A small figure, barely discernible, appeared within the heart of the twisted trees. Cole was all Sarah, tears streaming down her face, could muster to call out. Despite the sudden surge of hope, unease coiled like a cold serpent in my stomach. The figure, recognizing her voice, slowly emerged, his face dappled by a weird glow. "Mama," he whispered, fearfully. But as he stepped into the clearing, the visage that greeted us was tremendous and inexplicably terrifying. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were now glassy and reflective as silver, devoid of all emotion. His lips moved, repeating the rhyme ad nauseum, his grin absurdly warped. We rushed towards him, but were thrown backward, a mighty force repelling us. Cole merely stood there, haunted and haunting, trapped in an invisible dome, his voice echoing that horrifying rhyme over and over. The forest seemed to close in on us, as if sharing a gnarled, grotesque smirk. As dawn broke, Cole vanished before our eyes, the serenade still echoing within the forest. Leaving us dumbstruck, our hope retracted with brutal force. The sun now revealed the remnants of an erstwhile indigenous settlement, marked by the ring of the twisted trees. As I discovered later, it was believed that the spirits of the wronged natives still resided within these woods. Cole was never seen again, adding to the forest's haunted tales. The heart-wrenching cry of Sarah that day still echoes, much like Cole's hollow chant. To this day, I tread with respectful fear in these woods, haunted by that night's memory. I understand I'm the guest, and the otherworldly inhabitants of this forest, the ruling hosts. I've spent most of my afternoons in the forest near my house. One day, I decided to take a different trail, one that I'd never been down before. I stepped over fallen logs and pushed past leafy branches as the sun began to set and the forest darkened. Suddenly, in the midst of this near nighttime exploration, I stumbled upon something unusual, something that made me feel like I'd entered a completely different world. I kicked something hard hidden beneath the leaves, and when I bent down to look, my heart stopped. It was a cracked piece of stone, almost completely covered by dirt and moss. My guts twisted as I brushed off the leaves and saw the faded string of letters. A name, a date, etched into the stone. It was a tombstone. I was standing in an old abandoned cemetery. A chill raced up my spine as I looked around. Dozens of old, weather-beaten tombstones stood hunched in the undergrowth, long separated from the mortal remains they were there to honor. It was eerily quiet, the only sound being an occasional rustle of leaves responding to the restless wind. I took a couple of steps forward to see if there was anything that could tell me whose graves lay abandoned and forgotten here. On one tombstone, right at the back of the cemetery, there were 2 words in Latin, Veritatem Revelare. I looked it up, and it means, reveal the truth. Just as I read the words, I heard a voice. I spun around. There, coming towards me from the shadows, was a figure in worn-out clothes. His eyes were like glowing embers in the gloom. "You found our secret," the figure spoke. His voice was hollow, echoing through the trees. I felt my hands shake. I stuttered. "I didn't mean to trespass. You've awakened our stories that were meant to be forgotten. Can you carry our truth?" I was scared out of my mind. I wanted to run, but part of me was curious. I swallowed my fear and nodded. The figure began to speak again. He spoke of betrayal, of sacrifice, of faded dreams, and untold secrets. He told stories that made my blood run cold and my heart feel heavy. As he spoke, I could see the faces of people behind him. They looked like shadows, but with distinct, somber expressions. They began humming a slow, melancholy tune. I felt tears prick my eyes at their stories of love, loss, and pain. It was like I was watching a sad movie all by myself in the middle of a spooky forest. When he finished, the figure looked at me and said, "Remember us." Then he and the ghostly crowd kind of faded away. Just like that, I was alone in the graveyard again, only the eerie silence keeping me company. As soon as the sun peeked up in the morning, I headed home. The experience was overwhelming. I kept thinking about the stories they've told me, the raw emotion that I felt. As scary as it was, I left with a new understanding of the world and the histories that lay forgotten beneath our feet. I couldn't help but think about how the small things in our lives, like love and sacrifice, can have a big impact. For better or worse, those stories, their stories, are now a part of me. They reminded me of the truth. We all have a story, and we all want it to be remembered, even after death. One afternoon, I decided to hike a trail I'd never been on before. It led deep into the woods. A thick canopy of trees covered the sky, and it was a little dark, but I wasn't scared. I'm used to being alone in nature. But as soon as the sun started to set and the air grew cold, a weird feeling settled in me, like someone was watching. I found a stream that led into a lake. Crystal clear water, really pretty. Suddenly, I heard a splash behind me. I spun around thinking it's some fish, but nothing. I shrugged it off and sat down by the water, eating the sandwich I'd brought. Out of nowhere, I heard a splash again, louder this time. "Who's there?" I called out, feeling uneasy. Nothing. Thinking I just imagined it, I got up to leave when I saw a wet footprint on the ground near me. I was hit with a bolt of fear. Was someone watching me? I took out my pocket knife, trying not to freak out. I marched back towards the trail, but it was darker now, hard to see anything. I switched on my flashlight. The beam of light tearing through the dark was somewhat comforting. Suddenly, I heard a low growl. My heart pounded in my chest, and I spun my flashlight around. trying to catch any movement. Nothing. I started to walk faster, but the growl came again, this time closer. My palms were sweaty now, grip tightening around the knife. And then, I saw it. 2 glowing eyes, not far away. "Who's there?" I yelled again, the fear in my voice echoing all around. No answer. But then a figure stepped closer. I wished it was a bear or a wolf. But no, not a chance. It was a man, or what looked like a man, but covered in dark, sparkling scales like a fish. "Wah, what are you?" I stammered, taking a step back. "I am of the lake," the man said in a voice like gurgling water. "I don't have a name." Hearing a voice that sounded like water, it sent chills up my spine. But he just stood there, watching me. "Whoa, what do you want?" I managed to get out, thumbing the blade of my knife. "I want a friend," he said, sounding almost sad. But you scared me," I protested. The strange man, or fish man, I still can't wrap my head around it, but he looked almost sheepish. "Sorry. It's hard to approach people when you're like..." He gestured at his scales with a poor attempt at a smile. The rest of the night was bizarre. We spoke about life by the lake, his solitude, and how humans littered his home. I felt a weird mix of severe fear and sympathy. But when the sun started to rise, he retreated back into the water, just vanished beneath the surface. I stumbled out of the forest, exhausted and in awe of the weirdest night of my life. Part of me was terrified, but another part felt sad for this lonely creature. I promised to keep his secret, and somehow that made him seem less scary. After all, we were both just looking for a friend. After that, I never experienced any fear when hiking alone in the woods. Each time I did, I gave a friendly nod towards the lake, just in case my scaly friend was watching. I've been to a lot of freaking weird places, you know, but the weirdest one, I'd say it was this swamp my friend Jake dragged me into last spring. Adventure, he'd called it. "We'll camp there," he said on a Saturday evening, smirking at our usual spot at John's Diner. I didn't like the idea, 'cause swamps are gross, right? But against better judgment, I shrugged. Sure, why not? We went next Friday night, driving into a forgotten part of Wandering Woods. The place was thick with icky mud, weird noises, and giant, gnarly-looking trees with moss all over. You could see fog squatting over the swamp water like some creepy ghost. Bugs hummed, frogs belched. Overall, a nice thick mixture of let's not be here. We set up camp in what seemed like a less nightmarish spot. After a quick dinner of canned beans and lukewarm soda, we goofed around a bit till the noises quieted down and the moon started to peek through the trees. Out of nowhere, deep into the night, we heard what sounded like a cry. A shrill, high-pitched yelp, something like a baby or a wounded animal, almost human-like. I remember clutching my sleeping bag tighter. "Probably just an animal," Jake muttered sleepily, trying to convince both of us. Then came the sound of something moving through the water. Not like a fish, but bigger. I sat straight and looked at Jake. His expression mirrored my own, scared out of my mind. "Let's check it out," Jake suggested after a long pause, sounding about as brave as a mouse facing a cat. But he was always the act-first kind of guy, so he brought out the flashlight. We crept towards the freaky sounds, flashlight beam bouncing around on fog. We were about halfway to the water when something dark moved within the mist. I got a glimpse, 2 red eyes, right there in the fog, staring at us. "Jake," I whispered, "what the hell's that?" Fear glued him to the spot. His eyes locked onto those glowing red orbs and his face turned deadly pale. Then came the voice, a deep, throaty utterance that sent a cold chill up our spines. "Leave." The voice was like the grinding of rocks, echoing all around us. I can't describe it to ya. It just didn't belong in our world. "Bloody hell, run." Jake broke the silence with a horrified scream. I didn't need any more encouragement. We sprinted back towards our campsite. The swamp's sick, cold air whipping past as we grenades out of hell. Every leaf rustle, every splash, every shadow. We thought it was that thing closing in. We piled into Jake's car, the engine roaring to life on the second try. Without looking back, we hauled ass out of that swamp, leaving behind our tents and gear. We didn't talk much on the drive back to town. What was there to say? Next day, safe in my own bed, sunlight streaming in through the window, I still felt that fear, like I'd left a part of me back there in that hellhole of a swamp. Jake moved away that summer. Said he needed a change of scenery. Can't say I blamed him. We don't talk much about that night. Don't want to either. But every now and then, when I'm alone, and the night's too quiet, I swear I can hear that voice again. A word of advice from good old me. Stay the hell out of swamps after dark. Ain't nothing good comes out of it. You got my scary swamp story. Hope it's enough. All right, here's a forest story for ya from my own eyes. Picture this. A bunch of us budged up a trip to Old Piney Woods. That's a local forest we got round here. Yeah, that old place running along the edge of town. Whole lot of rumors about it, but we thought, what the heck, it's the summer. Old Piney don't sound that scary, right? Well, you ain't heard the whole story yet. Me, along with my buddies Matt and Sam, were part of this little adventure. We'd been friends since as long as I can remember, practically brothers. So first couple of days went smooth. Fishing, swinning in the creek, cooking them beans over the fire, the usual camping stuff. We were all having a blast up there, especially when we started telling ghost stories, all made up for a laugh, round the fire at night. Then things turned weird late one evening. We found peculiar-looking tracks going around our campsite. Large ones, like no animal prints I'd ever seen. My first thought was a bear, but these were weird, like half-human or something. Matt and Sam noticed too, but we shrugged it off. No point freaking out, right? But that night, the noises started. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling. Normal forest noises, I tried convincing myself. Until we heard it. A low, creepy growl, not too far from our tent. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. It sounded so wrong, so unearthly. Sam, brave as he was, decided to peek out of the tent. He came back in a second later, white as a sheet. I'll never forget his words, whispered in sheer terror. There's something real big over there. We spent the rest of that night silent, hearing that thing sniffing around. It felt like ages till the sun came up. We were relieved. The daytime brought a sense of security, even though the tracks were still there, a mute reminder of what lurked around. We should have left, but we felt brave in the light, you know. So we stayed another night. Biggest mistake of our lives. Came evening. We were nervous, but nothing happened for a while. We even started to think that maybe we dreamt the whole thing up. But then, there it was again, those footsteps, that growling. This time, it was closer. Suggestions about packing up and leaving were just starting up when we heard it. A bone-chilling, harrowing scream, like some poor creature in deep pain. It echoed throughout the forest, bouncing off the trees and freezing us to the spot. It was something. The desolate sound carried sadness, anger, fear, all bundled up. We were packing up, fast as hell, when it appeared out of the woods. It was huge, covered in matted, thick fur, with glowing eyes peering at us. Part human, part beast, like something from a sick nightmare. We froze, staring at it staring right back at us. Then Matt, that idiot, muttered something about showing bravery or something, picked up the biggest rock he could find and launched it at the creature. He missed, but the thing didn't like it, not a bit. It roared, a deep, punishing sound that made us feel so small, so irrelevant. Run was all I managed to shout before we were sprinting back towards our truck, parked a mile or so away. The thing was right behind us. I could hear its heavy feet hitting the ground, the low growl in its throat. It was the longest run of my life. Somehow, we made it to the truck. We piled in, and thankfully Matt managed to start it up in one go. We drove off, leaving behind everything but our lives. Way back to the summer of 13, me and my buddies, Jake and Tommy, decided to pack our gear and head out to Miller's Forest, out on the edge of town. Now, Miller's Forest, it had a lot of stories about it. Folks said it was haunted and all, filled with creepy crawlies and God knows what else. But hey, we were 18, fresh out of high school, thinking we were invincible and stuff. First day was a blast. We cast lines in the river, grilled some hot dogs over the fire, took a swim in the lake. Just a bunch of guys enjoying the great outdoors, smoking cigarettes and shooting the breeze. As night fell, we told scary stories, which was more funny than scary if you ask me. We were ready to doze off when we first heard it. This strange, low growling sound, like something big and mean. We all heard it. Right away, our smiles faded. Jake, who usually loved a good scare, looked scared out of his wits. Just some animal, probably. Tommy tried to calm us down. We nodded, not really convinced, but wanting to believe him. Didn't sleep much that night, thanks to whatever was out there making that noise. Next morning, we found these large, weird footprints around our site. They were bigger than any animals I'd ever seen. They were almost like human footprints, but way too big. Told Tommy about it, and he just said it was probably a bear. I didn't like the look of him, but didn't want to seem like a chicken, so I kept quiet. By sundown, we were all feeling a bit edgy, and the fire didn't make the place seem any less creepy. We had our hot dogs and tried to crack jokes, but the laughter didn't quite reach our eyes. That night, it was worse. The growling was louder and closer. Things started to get real. "Did you see that?" Jake suddenly whispered, scared out of his mind. We followed his gaze, and there, standing at the edge of the woods, was this hulking figure. It was too dark to see clearly, but it was huge, with glowing eyes looking right at us. Right then, panic set in. We were scared shitless, scrambling to pack our gear. You wouldn't think it possible how fast we stripped that campsite. I thought my heart was going to pop out of my chest. And then, there was this god-awful howl. I swear, I ain't never heard anything like it. Like a wolf, but more guttural, more human. It echoed around us. I felt it run down my spine. Tommy stopped in his tracks, face pale in the glow of the dying fire. That was when we saw it. The thing, half man, half beast, stepped into the clearing, teeth bared under a heavy snout, eyes burning in the dark. A furry mammoth thing was all I could think. For a brief few seconds, we were all frozen, staring right into the face of our worst nightmare. Then Tommy broke the silence. "Run, run," he screamed. We didn't dare to look back. We ran like madmen. If anyone had seen us, they'd think we were being chased by the devil himself. And maybe we were, 'cause I could hear the thing behind us. Running, growling. Out of breath, hearts pounding, we made it back to Tommy's old pickup and see that beast up the figure emerge from the edge of the woods. I can still see it standing there, roaring as we drove away, leaving our gear and a part of our bravery behind in that goddamned forest. We haven't talked about it since. Jake moved out of town. I joined the army, and Tommy, he's still here, doing his mechanic work. Only thing we learned from that weekend was, it's not cool to mess with things you don't understand. Because whatever we saw that night, whatever left those footprints, it was something not of this world. Ain't no bear that walks on its hind legs and growls like that. We all got our own lives now, but I don't think any of us, me, Jake, or Tommy, can forget that summer. Some nights, when I'm alone in the dark, I can still hear that growl, that haunting pitch-black howl, and I know I ain't ever going back to Miller's Forest.